Hello and welcome to the Daily Episode Network, and in this episode we'll be talking about the world's biggest white collar scam, the world's biggest Ponzi scheme. And do you know who we're talking about?
Bernie Madoff. In the words of a great American writer, Alan Abel, I look at the newspapers and I cannot believe most of the stories I read. Bernie Madoff, who actually screwed millions of people for billions of dollars. It's just unbelievable what he got away with and how long it took for him to be exposed. A guy like that should be hanged.
Really? He should be hanged? That is what the newspapers think?
Yes.
Well, Bernie Lawrence Madoff was an American fraudster as they claim, but he was a financier. He ran the largest Ponzi scheme in history, or maybe the largest investment scheme in history.
Worth about $64.8 billion.
Madoff pleaded guilty in 2008 to 11 counts of felony frauds, including security frauds, wire fraud, mail fraud, perjury, and money laundering. Nobody complained against him, nobody caught him. He went up to the police and said, I committed the fraud. How does that make sense?
Then why did he plead guilty?
Maybe he had just earned enough and
So he just, he earned enough, so he decided to go to jail.
yeah, he left the money to his kids. His kids complained about it.
So
Nobody
that's
knows.
how everything works. You've earned enough, so I'm going to jail.
Maybe not, but maybe in Bernie's world, yes. So Bernie was one of the best traders on Wall Street. He was considered amazing because his consistent investment returns made him one of the best fund managers. He was later the chairman of Nasdaq Stock Exchange and revolutionized the trading business. Bernie Madoff started his own investment firm in 1960 with just $5,000, and that too he had made working in the summertime as a lifeguard. Later, he took $50,000 from his father-in-law and continued the firm. In order to compete with the large investment firms, Madoff turned to technology. His firm
So
pioneered.
basically, he used technology to do the scam.
He was not doing the scam. He was making people invest. And actually, this was considered a very futuristic step. He used technology for the first time in stock exchange. The human traders were no longer needed. People started trading electronically, like we all do today. He started it all. With the focus on technology, the company was able to provide lower cost for their services, which led them to have a substantial share of the share market transactions.
He had spent decades building his multi-billion-dollar empire until one day the house of cards fell, and all that remained was a decade of lies as he had stolen $65 billion, the largest Ponzi scheme the world had ever seen.
I don't remember people complaining against him. I don't remember riots, protests, people losing their money because he would return everybody's money. How is this a Ponzi scheme?
It was a Ponzi.
Well, what is a Ponzi scheme? Do you even know?
I know, but you can surely share your views.
The person who runs a Ponzi scheme actually asks their first investor to invest, and then they give high returns on their investment. And then they find new investors that give them new money, and then the new money goes to the original investors. So it's like they continue pumping in new money and dumping it to the old investors. And all of that is done while they are pocketing their own cut. And in other words, they take from one person to pay another person.
So basically, they rob one person to pay another. It's a chain.
It's a chain where everybody gets paid. Nobody is actually being robbed. Paul Charles Ponzi was the first person to run the scheme, and hence it's called a Ponzi scheme.
Great. But you know what? We're not talking about Ponzi scheme here. We are talking about Madoff's case.
He was a very smart businessman, a very smart trader, and somebody who bought electronics to trade it.
Investors would give their money to invest, and Madoff gives them a healthy return. But the return does not come from actual investments. He simply gives back a small portion of their initial investment instead. Eventually, when the money dried up, so the stock needed to be replenished, so Madoff moved to next investor, and so the scam grew larger.
The scam or the investment?
Scam. And it looked as if, the investor has money invested in Madoff's firm and he is getting a good return. But in reality, the money was being siphoned into Madoff's own accounts as well as paying off old investors to keep the lie afloat. Meanwhile, he would show investors false reports that showed they were making money, and if any of them wanted out, he would pay them with money from the group account.
You think that's fraud? I think that's smart. Actually, Madoff or his firm hadn't made a single trade since 1993. But did anybody get to know about it? No. Or people say he hadn't made a trade from perhaps even earlier. Furthermore, the fraud ran until the market went into recession in 2008. So people in recession wanted their money back and Madoff couldn't pay it. So he himself went to the police.
Yeah, because he was, doing his own work, he was scamming people
Okay.
until the recession came. And then
If it was that big a scam, then why were there 6 investigations that happened before 2008, but none of them got any hard evidence against him? Every time they found that the investigation was incomplete due to lack of evidence, and he was found to be in the correct always.
in December 2008, Wall Street was illuminated in red. Trillions of dollars were wiped out from the stock market.
So he also faced some loss then, and so did his investors.
In rushes and panics, investors were asking for their original investment back. So were Madoff's clients. Bernie tried, but nothing was enough. The withdrawals were still more than he could bring in, because he thought no one would ask for the money until the recession came.
But was the recession his fault?
So,
He suffered because of it, like everybody else. And otherwise, he was returning everybody's money just fine.
yeah, he was robbing one person to return another person's money.
Let me tell you an irony. Nobody exposed him, not even one of his clients. He decided to turn himself in as he had no more money or new investors anymore. Madoff told his sons and wife about everything, including that he has decided to turn himself in at the end of the week. Thereafter, his sons called his lawyers and turned Madoff in before he could turn himself in, fearing that they would be accomplices to their loss.
So the whole family was involved in this scheme.
Maybe his children just stole father's money and then sent him to jail, and his father, to protect the children, committed.
Or maybe their father was, doing something wrong and children turned him in.
I don't think so. I think he was smart.
No, he was scamming. So in the end, Madoff did not fight but admitted his crime and offered his remorse. And within a few months, he was sentenced to 150 years of imprisonment. I believe this is probably the largest punishment, longest
Longest
punishment.
punishment. But don't you think it's a little too much for a 65-year-old? I mean, nobody's going to live to see 210 years, right?
But his crime was so severe that the court had to punish him with such a punishment.
So in April 2021, he died at the FMC Bunter Prison in North Carolina of natural causes at the age of 82. So I think he was one of the smartest businessmen, the smartest business
Or maybe
minds
we can say smartest scammer.
ever to be born. I think we cannot agree, but let us know what you think in the comment section below. Leave a like on this video if you liked it and found it informative. Share it amongst your friends.
And subscribe the channel.
Thank you.